2. Monopolies and state ownership. State property and monopolies. State property, including state enterprises and shares in monopolistic associations, is used to funnel resources to monopolists. Examples of state monopolies include postal services, savings banks, and state-owned railways. Lenin described state monopolies as tools to enrich millionaires, often operated by the same banking magnates who control private banks. Critique of right-wing socialists. Right-wing socialists claim that state property under imperialism signifies a transition from capitalism to socialism. Marxist-Leninist classics refute this, asserting that state ownership in capitalist societies only enhances capitalist exploitation. State property and exploitation. Engels highlighted that productive forces have outgrown private ownership, necessitating state control in industries like transportation. This transition to state ownership does not eliminate capitalism. It intensifies exploitation through non-economic coercion and labor militarization. Role of state property in capitalism. State property enriches monopolies and intertwines them with the bourgeois state. Lenin cited examples where state monopolies in Germany aimed to support private industry rather than benefit consumers or the state. Fluctuations in state property. The size of state property varies across countries and periods, generally increasing during imperialism and crises. It grows notably during wars and is higher in aggressive imperialist states like Germany and Japan before World War II. State property in Japan and Germany. In 1936, Japan owned 550 factories, 70% of railways, and had significant shares in quasi-government companies. In Germany, state property in 1925 included railways, banks, and industrial enterprises like FIAG and Hibernia. The state's role in joint stock companies increased during economic crises, exemplified by Germany's heightened state participation in 1932. High state ownership in Italy, 1945 state control over companies with a total capital of 24.1 billion liras, 36.3% of total share capital. Significant state ownership in air transport, 92.1%, maritime transport, 77%, mining, 72.8%, and metallurgical industries, 71.1%. 7 largest banks were state-owned or controlled through the Institute for Industrial Reconstruction. Interconnection of state and monopolies. State enterprises act as channels for merging state apparatus with monopolies. Boards of state companies filled with representatives from large monopolies, e.g., Krupp, Deutsche Bank. Example: Goering concern in Germany controlled numerous enterprises, highlighting state monopoly intertwining. State enterprises and monopoly benefits. Large monopolists often true owners of state enterprises. Board members from monopolies set policies favoring large enterprises, e.g., lower electricity tariffs. State property used for profitable orders and contracts, benefiting monopolies. Historical examples of state ownership. Tsarist Russia. Significant state property with government providing large orders at high prices. State ownership seen as a source of enrichment for monopolies and sustaining capitalist systems. State ownership dynamics. State ownership in capitalist countries is dynamic, can increase or decrease based on monopoly capital needs. Motivations include strengthening capitalist systems and enriching ruling cliques. Development of state enterprises. Construction of state enterprises often funded by the budget. Significant growth during pre-war and war periods, e.g., USA spent $29.3 billion on military construction, 1940 to 1945. Motives for state enterprise construction. Expansionist policies and war preparation drive construction of military bases, arsenals, strategic infrastructure. Some enterprises built at state expense due to being unprofitable or risky for private capital, e.g., ferrous metallurgy in Japan. Historical case studies. Germany and Japan. State-funded enterprises during wars. USA. Tax incentives encouraged private investment in military construction during World War II, yet private capital was still reluctant to invest. Private versus state investment during war. Private investment in construction during wartime focused on metal production and other industries, while military production was funded primarily by state investments, financed through increased taxes on workers. State-owned enterprises. Most state-built enterprises during the war were managed by private firms through profitable contracts, with a small fraction directly operated by the government. After the war, many of these enterprises were sold to large monopolies at low prices. Monopolistic control. A significant portion of the enterprises, valued at billions, ended up in the hands of the largest corporations such as General Motors and United States Steel, which benefited from preemptive purchasing rights and depreciation laws. Post-war conversion. After the war, many state-built enterprises were adapted for peacetime production, with laws facilitating their low-cost transfer to private hands, enriching monopolies. Bourgeois nationalization. Nationalization of industries, often portrayed as socialist, in reality served to strengthen monopolies, providing them with financial support and preventing bankruptcy. State support for monopolies. During economic crises, governments in countries like Germany and Italy bought shares in failing companies to support monopolists, often at inflated prices, which later benefited private owners during reprivatization. Dual role of nationalization. Nationalization often led to denationalization or reprivatization, where previously state-owned assets were sold back to private entities, enriching monopolies at both stages. Historical examples. Instances in the U.S., England, and Japan illustrate how state resources were leveraged for private gain through strategic nationalization and denationalization efforts. Conclusion. State ownership in capitalist countries is part of a broader mechanism that enriches monopolies, intertwining state and corporate interests, and exploiting public resources.